They say money can't buy happiness, but it can definitely buy a front row seat to spectacular stupidity. We've all fantasized about winning the lottery, but these 49 winners didn't just live the dream. They lit it on fire, threw it off a cliff, and then paid someone to film the wreckage. This is financial insanity on a legendary scale. 1. Diana decided that having free will was simply too exhausting for a multimillionaire, so she dropped $15 million on a team of professional decision-makers. She literally outsourced her entire consciousness. These weren't financial consultants. These were people paid to decide if she wanted eggs or toast and which sock went on the left foot. She lived a vegetative existence while a committee debated her Netflix queue. Eventually, the decision-makers made the only logical choice available to them. They quit working for her, presumably because deciding when another adult needs to use the restroom takes a heavy toll on the soul. 2. Roger took a look at theme parks like Disney World and thought, "You know what's missing? More waiting." He blew $12 million to build a park dedicated entirely to standing in line. There were no roller coasters or rides at the end, just more queues leading to other queues. You paid an admission fee to stand behind a stranger for hours in the hot sun. The main attraction was a 4-hour line that terminated at a brick wall. It became surprisingly popular with masochists and people who genuinely miss the DMV experience, proving that some people just hate themselves. 3. Christine felt that her life lacked a certain soundtrack, so she burned $9 million hiring a squad of professional cheerleaders to follow her 24/7. Imagine trying to use the bathroom while a pyramid of women screams your name in the hallway. She had choreographed dance routines for putting on sweatpants and aggressive fight songs for brushing her molars. It sounds supportive, but having 12 people do backflips every time you successfully open the refrigerator gets old fast. Eventually, the squad lost their voices celebrating the miracle of Christine sitting on the couch for 3 hours. 4. James looked at his bank account and decided the world needed a professional hide-and-seek league for adults. He poured $8 million into corporate sponsorships, referees with whistles, and stadiums filled with elaborate cabinets and secret trapdoors. He even established a ranking system for professional hiders. The sport came to a tragic halt when the reigning world champion took his job a little too seriously and vanished during the finals. Nobody could find him to declare a winner, and for all we know, he is still crouching behind a vending machine waiting for the prize money. 5. Sandra developed an obsession that makes collecting stamps look like an extreme sport. She spent $15 million gathering every variation of the word "the" from different languages and dialects. She hired linguistic researchers and built a museum dedicated entirely to definite articles. Visitors could walk through hallowed halls gazing at plaques that just said "le," "la," or "das." It was the most expensive grammar lesson in human history. While other rich people bought yachts, Sandra bought a prepositional nightmare that left everyone wondering if she hit her head when she won the jackpot. 6. Janet Lee won $18 million and immediately decided she wanted to be the best friend of every politician in America. She didn't buy a house or a car. She bought fundraising dinners. She donated so much cash to candidates she had never met that she completely went broke in less than a decade. She thought writing checks would buy her influence and a seat at the cool kids' table, but she was wrong. The second the money dried up, those politicians stopped returning her calls faster than a telemarketer hangs up on a broke person. 7. Richard decided that baseball was too overstimulating, so he invested $13 million to launch a professional grass-watching league. He built stadium seating around random suburban backyards and sold tickets to people who wanted to see turf exist. He even hired color commentators to excitedly narrate the photosynthesis process and analyze the shade of green in real time. The competition involved staring at a lawn without blinking for hours. It is hard to say who was crazier, Richard for funding this botanical boredom, or the people who actually paid for season tickets. 8. Sharon spent $4 million turning her morning routine into a high-stakes episode of MasterChef. She hired a team of 12 professional food critics to sit in her kitchen every morning and review her bowl of cereal. These culinary experts wrote detailed reports on the milk-to-crunch ratio and the structural integrity of her Honey Nut Cheerios. Her kitchen looked like a Michelin star restaurant, except the judges were holding up scorecards for a woman in a bathrobe eating cornflakes. If you need a round of applause to eat breakfast, you have bigger problems than money. 9. Tony decided that silence was his mortal enemy, so he spent $18 million on a team of professional silence breakers. These weren't musicians. They were human noise machines hired to ensure he never had a moment of peace. They followed him into libraries with kazoos and banged pots and pans while he tried to sleep. His quest to eliminate quiet made him a walking noise pollution hazard. He became the most annoying person in 3 different states, and his neighbors eventually petitioned the local government to pass noise ordinances specifically named after him. He paid a fortune just to never hear his own thoughts. 10. Keith didn't want to build a legacy. He wanted to smash history with a wrecking ball. He spent a staggering $37 million purchasing beautiful, historic buildings just to demolish them for his own amusement. We aren't talking about old shacks. He bought 19th century churches and libraries, then giggled like a schoolgirl while heavy machinery turned them into dust. He didn't build condos or parking lots. He just left piles of rubble as a monument to his boredom. It got so bad that 3 different towns banned him from entering their city limits, treating him like a Godzilla villain made of cash and bad intentions. 11. Carl looked at $25 million and thought the world of combat sports was missing something crucial: goose feathers. He poured his fortune into professional pillow fighting, building arenas with soft floors and hiring referees who took fluffiness regulations very seriously. He created complex rules about swing velocity and pillow density, but the league hit its peak and its rock bottom when his own elderly mother entered the championship. It turns out 70 years of swatting kids with cushions makes you a lethal weapon. She obliterated the competition, proving that Carl spent a fortune just to get beaten up by his mom in front of a live audience. 12. Janet decided that her life was a performance art piece that required constant validation. She burned $10 million hiring applause coordinators to follow her around and clap at appropriate intervals. We are talking a polite golf clap for walking to the fridge, a solid round of applause for answering the phone, and a standing ovation for successfully parallel parking. It fed her ego until the inevitable happened. Her staff started developing carpal tunnel syndrome. The clapping stopped not because the money ran out, but because her employees physically couldn't put their hands together anymore without crying in pain. 13. Tonda is the poster child for cutting off your nose to spite your face. She spent 11 years and $14 million in legal fees just to prove she didn't have to share her jackpot with her coworkers. She hired 17 law firms and dragged everyone through court appeals 6 times. The math is painful here. She spent significantly more money fighting them than she would have if she just bought everyone in the office a brand new Ferrari and called it a day. She literally paid millions for the privilege of being the most hated person in the break room. That is a special level of petty. 14. Michael sank $28 million into the wettest business failure of all time, the world's first underwater shopping mall. He was convinced that marine life was an untapped demographic for retail therapy. He constructed submerged storefronts, hired scuba-certified sales clerks, and stocked waterproof merchandise. The only problem? Fish have terrible credit scores and zero interest in capitalism. The customers just swam around eating the inventory while the sales staff tried to fold wet shirts. It turns out, selling luxury goods to bass and trout is a terrible business model, even if you have the monopoly on the ocean floor. 15. Henry had $11 million and a dream that absolutely nobody else shared: professional competitive sneezing. He built specialized sneeze arenas, which I imagine were covered in plastic, and hired judges to rate athletes on volume, spray distance, and technique. He even created different weight classes for nasal capacity. The league was picking up steam until the grand finale, where his star athlete sneezed with such violent force that he dislocated his jaw on live television. The paramedics had to come in, and the audience realized they were watching people spread germs for cash. The sport died instantly, probably from a sinus infection. 16. Suzanne won over $4 million and immediately turned into a walking ATM for every grifter in the neighborhood. She didn't buy yachts. She bought expensive gifts for total strangers and handed out wads of cash like they were party favors. If you had a sob story, she had a checkbook. It wasn't charity, it was a lack of boundaries. When she eventually passed away, she was completely penniless. Authorities found her house filled not with assets, but with stacks of thank you cards from people who had happily bled her dry. It's a harsh lesson. You can't buy friendship, but you can definitely rent a lot of leeches. 17. Susan spent $7 million constructing the ultimate echo chamber. She hired a team of professional agreement specialists whose only job was to nod enthusiastically at whatever nonsense came out of her mouth. If she said the sky was neon green, they agreed. If she claimed she invented the question mark, they praised her genius. They supported her theories that gravity was just a suggestion and that fish could fly if they really tried. She paid a fortune to never be corrected, creating a bubble of delusion so thick that reality couldn't penetrate it with a jackhammer. It's cheaper to just buy a mirror and talk to yourself. 18. Robert looked at the Olympics and thought, too much movement. So he dropped $4 million to legitimize competitive breathing. He built state-of-the-art training facilities with excellent air filtration and hired lung capacity coaches. The tournaments involved athletes sitting perfectly still, trying to breathe more efficiently than their opponents. It was about as exciting as watching paint dry in a vacuum. The sport suffocated quickly because the competitors kept passing out from hyperventilation in their attempt to win the gold. It turns out, when you try to win at breathing, your body just shuts down to save you from your own stupidity. 19. Frank didn't just buy a roller coaster. He inflicted one on his entire neighborhood. He spent $40 million building a track that wound through 6 different properties without asking permission first. The ride crashed through bedroom windows, looped around chimneys, and splashed down in the city fountain. He genuinely thought his neighbors would be thrilled to have a theme park ride buzzing through their rose gardens. Instead of thanking him for the free adrenaline rush, everyone sued him immediately. Frank learned the hard way that eminent domain doesn't apply just because you have a lot of money and a desire to scream at 60 miles per hour. 20. Peter watched too many sci-fi movies and decided physics was just a suggestion. He went to Craigslist, the most reputable source for quantum physicists, and hired a team of scientists to build a time machine in his garage. He funneled $5 million into this project, buying old microwaves, copper wire, and enough duct tape to wrap the moon. The only thing that successfully traveled through time was his bank balance, which vanished into the past faster than he could say flux capacitor. When the machine finally turned on, it didn't transport him to the Jurassic period. It just blew the fuses in the entire neighborhood. 21. Michelle decided that reality was too high definition and needed a bit more silhouette action. She dropped $8 million on a squad of professional shadow puppeteers to follow her 24/7. Every time she walked down a hallway, it became an epic saga featuring shadow dragons fighting rabbits on the drywall. It sounds whimsical until you're trying to have a serious conversation and there's a shadow giraffe eating your ear. She actually developed motion sickness from watching her own life get dramatized on the pavement. The only thing shadier than the puppets was the financial advice she was getting. 22. Danny took $6 million and dived headfirst into the internet's favorite conspiracy theory, that birds aren't real. He was convinced pigeons were government surveillance drones charging on power lines. He hired private investigators to tail seagulls, bought military-grade camera equipment to film sparrows, and built pigeon-proof bunkers in his backyard to hide from the feathered menace. His research concluded that every bird was a mechanical spy, which explains why he died alone and broke. Turns out, the government doesn't need to spy on you with pigeons when you're voluntarily broadcasting your insanity to the entire neighborhood. 23. Angela spent $16 million on supernatural security because she was convinced ghosts were trying to steal her lottery ticket. She hired teams of psychics, priests, and paranormal investigators to patrol her mansion 24/7. They installed ghost-detecting sensors in the toilets and held seances in the pantry. The only spirits that disappeared were the ones in her liquor cabinet, which her security team drank while she was sleeping. She paid a fortune to protect herself from phantoms while getting robbed by the living. 24. Jennifer decided that one dog wasn't enough, so she spent $13 million cloning her beloved poodle, Mr. Fluffernutter. But she didn't stop at one copy. She ordered 40 clones because she wanted a living carpet of dogs. Her mansion became a chaotic nightmare of 41 identical poodles who all responded to the same name at the same time. The barking was loud enough to shatter windows, and she spent the rest of her fortune on dog food and therapy for her identity crisis. 25. Robert dropped $24 million on mobile game microtransactions because he refused to lose at Candy Crush. He didn't invest in stocks. He invested in extra lives and color bombs. He hired a team of professional gamers to play on his account in shifts to ensure he remained the #1 player in the world globally. He is likely the only person in history to bankrupt himself buying digital gold bars that have absolutely zero value in the real world. He won the game, but definitely lost at life. 26. Sandra had a heart of gold and a brain of mush. She opened 47 free restaurants in 6 months to solve world hunger but forgot the minor detail of logistics. She didn't hire chefs or establish supply chains, so most locations just served whatever cereal she could buy at Costco that morning. Health inspectors found kitchens that looked like college dorm rooms, serving hope as the main course and expired milk as the beverage. She burned through her fortune trying to feed the world Captain Crunch, proving that good intentions don't pay the electric bill. 27. Donna took Crazy Cat Lady to a professional level. She spent $7 million buying a ranch and filling it with 2,000 rescue animals. We aren't just talking cats and dogs. She had a biblical amount of livestock. The ranch smelled like a zoo's bathroom during a heat wave in July. The stench was so powerful, it reportedly peeled paint off houses 3 miles away. Neighbors fled the area in droves. And when the money ran out, animal control had to enter the property wearing hazmat suits just to figure out which animals were actually supposed to be there. 28. Jack Whitaker is a legend of bad decisions. He blew through over $300 million, partly because he treated strip clubs like his personal investment portfolio. He had a habit of carrying briefcases filled with $500,000 in cash just for a single night out. One morning, he woke up to find that someone had smashed his car window and stolen $500,000 while he was inside being preoccupied. Most people keep emergency cash in their wallet. Jack kept the GDP of a small island nation in his passenger seat. That is the American dream right there. 29. Amanda decided she needed to optimize her existence, so she bought every self-help book ever published. Since she didn't want to actually read them, she hired a team of speed readers to summarize them into daily motivational speeches delivered at her breakfast table. She spent $5 million to have strangers scream affirmations at her while her scrambled eggs got cold. These morning pep talks lasted longer than most feature films. She was so busy getting motivated to live her best life that she forgot to actually go outside and live it. 30. Jennifer won $7 million and immediately decided that the entire world wanted her dead. She hired a team of professional food tasters because she was convinced her grocery store was trying to assassinate her. Every single meal had to be sampled by 20 different people before she would take a bite. Her payroll included full-time poison detectors whose only job was to test her Fruit Loops for cyanide every morning. She spent her fortune protecting herself from imaginary enemies, turning her kitchen into a bizarre medieval court where eating a sandwich required a security clearance. 31. Robert took $9 million and bought a private island, not for vacation, but to secede from reality. He declared himself King Robert I, printed his own currency with his face on it, and wrote a constitution that legally defined pizza as a human right. He even appointed his golden retriever as the Secretary of Defense. It was a sovereign nation of one, until the Coast Guard showed up. They didn't recognize his diplomatic immunity or his canine general, and they promptly arrested the king for massive tax evasion. Turns out, the IRS doesn't care about your imaginary kingdom. 32. George developed a perverse fascination with failure. He spent $14 million collecting things that almost happened. He bought losing lottery tickets that were off by just one number and hired investigators to track down people who came in second place in game shows. He compiled all this disappointment into a museum of near misses. Visitors could walk around and look at trophies that nobody won. It was the most depressing tourist attraction on Earth, leaving everyone who entered feeling like they almost had a good time. He successfully monetized the feeling of regret. 33. Patricia got it into her head that she had been walking wrong for 40 years. She spent $6 million hiring professional walking coaches to teach her the biomechanics of putting one foot in front of the other. They drilled her on heel placement, optimal arm-swinging trajectories, and synchronized breathing patterns. After months of training and millions of dollars, she looked like a malfunctioning robot every time she went to the mailbox. She actually walked significantly worse after the training because she was overthinking every single muscle movement. She paid a fortune to forget how to move. 34. Lisa developed a phobia of movie spoilers that cost her $6 million. She hired a tactical team of spoiler guards who scouted the internet and real life to ensure she never heard a plot twist before seeing the film. They wore earpieces and physically tackled anyone who started talking about the end of a movie near her. She lived in a carefully curated bubble of ignorance, paying people to cover her ears and scream "la la la" whenever pop culture was discussed in public. 35. Melissa decided that 60 was the new 20 and bought herself a wrestling career. She became the Lottery Lioness, a 4'11" grappler who struck fear into absolutely nobody. Her signature move wasn't a body slam. It was crouching under the ring skirt until the other wrestlers got bored and left. She remained technically undefeated because her opponents couldn't find her to pin her. She spent millions on pyrotechnics and capes, only to play high-stakes hide-and-seek in spandex. It turns out you can buy a championship belt, but you can't buy the ability to take a folding chair to the face. 36. Sue looked at her $3 million and thought, "You know who really appreciates fine linens? Cats." She opened a 5-star hotel exclusively for felines, complete with miniature crystal chandeliers and gourmet tuna service. She expected gratitude. What she got was a building that smelled like an ammonia factory. The cats treated the Egyptian cotton sheets like litter boxes and clawed the antique furniture to shreds. She basically paid a fortune to be a glorified maid for animals that would happily eat her if she died. The business model of charging rent to creatures with no pockets was, surprisingly, a failure. 37. Willie is the undisputed king of irony. He spent $19 million creating the world's most depressing database. He traveled across America interviewing every lottery winner who had gone broke, hiring researchers to verify their tales of financial ruin. He burned through his own fortune just to document how other people burned through theirs. He essentially created a how-to guide for bankruptcy by following the instructions himself. By the time he finished his research, he was the final entry in his own database, proving that irony can be very expensive. 38. Gregory poured $22 million into a restaurant concept that required a degree in poetry to order dinner. He only served foods that rhymed with the day of the week. Mondays were bun days. Tuesdays were stew days. The business model imploded immediately because nobody knew what to eat on Wednesday or Thursday. Customers stood at the counter trying to rhyme Wednesday with something edible while getting hungrier. He starved his clientele with linguistics. It turns out, restricting your menu based on the calendar is the fastest way to turn a fortune into a famine. 39. Gerald didn't wait for Christmas. He celebrated everything. He spent $50,000 on a black tie gala for National Pencil Day. He hired exclusively left-handed entertainers for International Left-Handers Day. He blew his fortune throwing ragers for holidays that Hallmark doesn't even acknowledge. He partied himself into bankruptcy celebrating National Talk Like a Pirate Day with actual ships. By the end, he was the only guest at his own party for National Ruin Your Credit Score Day. He proved you can have too much of a good time. 40. Ray turned his suburban backyard into a crater that looked like the surface of the moon. He dropped $19 million on heavy industrial excavation equipment to hunt for buried pirate treasure in a landlocked state. He dug so deep that his neighbors' foundations cracked and their houses sank 3 feet into the earth. After destroying the local geography and facing multiple lawsuits, his grand discovery was a rusty bottle cap from 1987. He literally moved mountains to find garbage, proving that X rarely marks the spot, but it definitely marks the bankruptcy filing. 41. Maria was tired of being wrong, so she spent $12 million to ensure she never lost a debate again. She hired a team of professional arguers to handle all her conflicts. These people screamed at grocery store cashiers about coupon policies and debated traffic lights about timing. They even fought with meteorologists about the probability of rain. She paid a fortune to be the most insufferable person in the county, outsourcing her care and energy to professionals. Her team had a better win record than most lawyers, mostly because everyone just gave up to make them stop talking. 42. Margaret developed a dairy obsession that ruined her life. She spent $15 million importing every variety of cheese known to man and built climate-controlled caves in her basement. Her house smelled so bad that the pizza delivery guy refused to walk up the driveway. The kicker? She developed severe lactose intolerance from all the tasting, but kept buying more wheels of Gouda anyway. She lived in a stinking monument to digestive distress, proving money can't buy common sense, but it can buy a lot of cheddar and a very lonely life. 43. Evelyn decided that December 25th should be a lifestyle, not a date. She kept her Christmas decorations up all year, adding more lights every single day until her house was visible from the International Space Station. She spent $28 million turning her property into a blinding supernova of festive cheer. She used more electricity than the rest of the neighborhood combined, forcing the power company to upgrade the local grid just to keep her reindeer glowing. Santa would have sued for copyright infringement if he saw the electric bill. 44. Thomas decided the future was olfactory, so he invested $21 million into developing smell-o-vision for the news. He wanted viewers to be able to smell the stories they were watching. He built prototypes that sprayed scents like burning building or wet dog into living rooms. Surprisingly, nobody wanted their house to smell like a landfill during a report on garbage strikes. The invention flopped harder than a fish out of water, and he was left with a warehouse full of stink bombs and 0 customers. 45. Martha decided that using her own brain was too much effort. She spent $8 million on a team of professional rememberers. These were human hard drives paid to memorize her schedule, her favorite colors, and even her own opinions. If she needed to know what she wanted for lunch, she had to ask her staff. She eventually forgot how to function as a human being because she outsourced her entire cognitive process. She paid millions to give herself early-onset amnesia by choice, eventually forgetting she had money to pay the rememberers. 46. Michael, known affectionately as the King of Chavs, won big and chose chaos. He spent $2 million buying a fleet of luxury cars, Bentleys, Mercedes, Porsches, just to smash them into each other in his backyard. He held a private demolition derby where the entry fee was a 6-figure vehicle. When asked why he was destroying engineering marvels, he simply shrugged and said it was cheaper than therapy. He cured his boredom by turning millions of dollars into twisted metal scrap, proving that money can't buy class, but it can buy a really expensive car crash. 47. Kevin spent $11 million solving his loneliness with a checkbook. He hired actors to pretend they were his best friends in public. He paid people to laugh at his terrible jokes, agree with his bad takes, and act thrilled when he walked into a room. It was the Truman Show, but sadder. The industry of fake friendship was booming until his besties unionized and went on strike for better dental benefits. You know you've hit rock bottom when your imaginary friends picket your front lawn demanding a raise. 48. Evelyn is a statistical anomaly with a gambling problem. She won the lottery not once, but twice, amassing over $5 million. Instead of investing, she drove straight to Atlantic City with suitcases literally stuffed with cash. She sat at the tables and didn't leave until she had dusted off every single penny. When asked about her strategy, she claimed she thought lightning would strike 3 times. The only thing that struck her was the realization that the house always wins, especially when you play like a maniac with zero impulse control. 49. Jeanette had $9 million and a vendetta against fun. She opened a chain of vegetable-themed amusement parks featuring thrilling attractions like the Carrot Coaster and the Broccoli Museum. She hired actors dressed as giant stalks of celery to lecture children about fiber intake. Shockingly, kids preferred video games and candy over being yelled at by a human tuber. The parks were ghost towns because nobody wants to pay admission to be reminded to eat their greens. It was the healthiest bankruptcy in history, leaving Jeanette with nothing but a surplus of kale. And that's how you turn a mountain of cash into a molehill of regret. Look, out of all this madness, I have to say the theme park dedicated to waiting in line is the undisputed champion of stupidity. It's a perfect monument to pointless spending. But I know you disagree. So, prove me wrong in the comments. Which of these 49 disasters was objectively dumber, and why am I an idiot for picking the theme park? If you enjoy financial train wrecks, obliterate that like button and subscribe for more.